Hey, I'm Dr. Elad Granot. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, and dean of Cleveland's Business School, the prestigious Boler College of Business at John Carroll University. This show is designed for those who think differently. We talk candidly about innovations in technology, in startups, venture capital, the global economy, higher education, how to lead, how to fail. We will leave no stone unturned. Expect passionate and sometimes controversial conversations with guests from all over the business spectrum once every month, wherever you stream your podcasts. Today's episode covers entrepreneurship and social enterprise and how they are affecting the Cleveland ecosystem, and really any ecosystem, as well as what we're doing to make sure that college students, university students are exposed to entrepreneurship and can develop an entrepreneurial mindset. And this is Bottom Line with the Business Dean. So I have, I always feel some pressure to deliver hot takes in plural. And despite the fact that I feel pressure to do that, I only have one today. And so what I was going to talk about, and Connor can put it later in post, is an article or an interview that came out with Roger Martin. And the headline sounds like something I would say, and that is business schools are very big, very, not just a big part of the current problem. Says Dr. Martin, who was a business dean for a long time and considered an expert on strategy. And the basic premise is that managers and people that go through business schools apply existing models even when they fail, and then they try harder, same model that failed. And the premise that Dr. Martin sort of writes this under is that what we teach in business schools is one way of doing things, the right way of doing things, and then our graduates go out into the marketplace, try things out, they don't work, they try it again with the same model, it doesn't work. So it is his claim, and I completely agree, that it is imperative to experiment with alternative frameworks. We're going to tie that into today's conversation, and also that data are not necessarily the end all of everything, and that B schools, business schools, should and can foster novel ways of thinking. And so it's amazing to me that somebody actually has to write this down as a new piece. But I get where this is coming from. The one pet peeve that I have about this is when somebody says business schools. They're not all the same, okay? And so the assumption is when you say business schools, and usually 90% of the articles, 90% of the conversations about business schools are about so-called elite business schools, right? Oh, it's Harvard Business School and Stanford and this and that. I got news for you. They're not business schools. It would be like saying that Rolls-Royce is cars. It's not, it doesn't work that way. And so writing about Rolls-Royce as if it's indicative of the entire automobile industry is just as stupid as referring to elite business schools as business schools. So having said that, gotten rid of my pet peeve, let me get a little bit into this hot take. The idea that what Dr. Martin says is that rethinking is necessary. Rethinking is entrepreneurship. And we're going to talk about that today. This entire problem that he identifies is the solution for it is entrepreneurship, both in terms of how you run business schools, how you run academic institutions, but also what we teach and how we instill an entrepreneurial mindset into these executives that keep on banging their heads into a wall, hoping that something will change. And so entrepreneurship is really the answer to all of these ills that are defined by Dr. Martin. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later today. I just want to finish with a couple of things that Dr. Martin writes about. And again, he says, business schools are a very big part of the current problem. They systematically teach their students to overuse and rely overly on data analysis. And again, first of all, not all business schools, Dr. Martin, at Boler College of Business, we don't. And many other schools are far beyond what you described, but many others are suffering from what you're describing as well. And so what the solution, the medicine that you are prescribing, doctor, is to start teaching the fundamental limitations of data analytics. And I've been talking about data synthesis being much more important than data analysis. I've been talking about that for years. Anything a computer can do, let the computers do. What computers so far are not able to do is synthesize all this data. So when Reka, my guest, and I, who I will introduce in a second, when we were coming up in our careers, getting data was a serious challenge. I know it's hard for Connor and Ashley to believe that, but getting data was the issue. And so now we actually have the flip side of that. We have too much data. And when you have that much data, you let the computer sort of crunch the numbers. And when they crunch the numbers, that's great, but they look backwards. They look backwards and they can't creatively put things together in terms of, okay, what can we do with what we know into the future? The assumption is that it's some sort of linear progression. Oh, data say this and that, and so it's just going to continue this way. We know that's never how it goes. Going backwards is easy. Predicting into the future takes a lot more of a synthesis, as I was saying, than analysis, and a lot more of an entrepreneurial mindset of taking what we know and thinking about how it should be, not what it's supposed to be according to the data. So that's really what you decide if it's hot or not, but what my take is for today. And so I'd like to introduce my guest for today. My guest today is Reka Barabas. She's the Chief Relationship Officer of the Entrepreneurship Education Consortium that we lovingly call the EEC. And before we get into this conversation, I'd like maybe a little bit of an introduction about Reka and maybe your background, and then we can get into what you do, both in the EEC and other initiatives that you're working on. Before you do, I want to highlight a couple things. First of all, we've known each other for a long time. Work together and have, I believe, mutual respect towards each other and what we're trying to do in the ecosystem. The other thing that I point out, and it's important for me to always mention about myself and others that share this category, is we're both immigrants. And I hope this gets picked up as part of our conversation today. So please tell me a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into what you do, and I'll ask some questions and give some answers, and we'll get going.
Thank you so much, Elad. It's a pleasure to be here on the podcast as your guest. And thank you for mentioning that we are both newcomers, kind of not new, but we are immigrants to the city of Cleveland and Ohio. And I've had the pleasure of living and working here for more than 20 years now. So my accent is here to stay. I think that's official. But a good chunk of those years I have spent working with entrepreneurs, specifically in entrepreneurship education. I have a master's in education, so I come at this very important topic from the angle of education. And I have ran accelerator programs and programs that focused on immigrant entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, and small business owners. And now I work with college student entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. So I like the variety, how different segments of the population do approach entrepreneurship.
Tell me. So a couple things. I wrote down the categories, right? You said immigrant, female, college, and social. Let's break it down. What makes each one of these unique, and what do they share?
Good question. Well, immigrant entrepreneurs, they lack networks. Yeah, for whatever reason, they decided to start a business here in their new hometown. And what we could do for them, how we could help them the most, is really connect them. Yeah, to others. Maybe they picked Cleveland as their new home because they were interested in doing something in healthcare, and Cleveland is clearly a hub and center for that, or whatnot. But just like for any entrepreneur, their network is very, very valuable. So if you are new to a community, you need those connections. So for them, I would highlight that.
I think most people overlook that, right? They when they interact with you, with me, with immigrants, I think they see a label, right? They see an immigrant, they hear the accent, they hear the funny name that can't be pronounced, and it's hard to get by that, right? I'm not judging or criticizing. It's just a fact, right? Humans are humans. I think, especially in the Midwest, maybe there's a very welcoming attitude on the one hand, but also it sort of categorizes folks into maybe labels that they don't want to necessarily carry, or not as their primary identity label. And so I think it's easy to overlook how difficult it is to be an immigrant to a new country, to speak a different language, to try and absorb different norms, and how critical it is to not have a network.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with you on that point too, that I think in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio in general is very welcoming, and people are usually very generous in making those introductions. But I also would point out that if you are a newcomer, then you usually bring your own network that's not in Northeast Ohio, and you can flip it and turn it around and say, hey, and I can make an introduction for you, in another region.
That is such a great point. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I never really stopped to think about it, but it's so true. I think I do it, and I know you do it organically without really thinking about it. And I think pointing that out, that I may be new and I don't necessarily know everybody here, but I bring my own value, I bring my own network, places, markets, opportunities that you may not have had access to had you not had a connection to me. That is phenomenal. Let's talk a little bit about female entrepreneurs. Maybe I should start by saying it's near and dear to my heart. I've my entire career as a venture capitalist, I've invested in, advised, and worked alongside female entrepreneurs. It's unfortunate that we have to go by gender when we think about it, right? I think entrepreneurs should be entrepreneurs, but I get it, and so because I get it, I try to equalize things. Luckily, I'm in a position where I could do that in terms of higher education. And what's interesting in higher education is we see across the country an increase in the percentage of female students beyond 50%, which is interesting. And then in pursuing higher graduate level business degrees, there is a distinct growth and advantage to female MBA students over male students. And so it's not like there's a lack of talent. It's not, and certainly I can't speak as well to engineering and other fields, science and medicine, but it's not like there's a lack of talent. It seems like there's some sort of bottleneck between very talented women who pursue higher education, who pursue careers, and entrepreneurship. And it could be, and it doesn't even have to be through higher education, just women who have the talent, have the desire, but feel like there are barriers to entrepreneurship. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, thank you. And you made some really good points. What I saw while I was running a female-focused accelerator program is that I think women have a lower risk tolerance. I think they approach entrepreneurship in a way where they want to be really sure that it will work. I think it takes a longer time for them to make that decision and to actually make that jump. So that's one difference that I observed, may not be true for everyone. And another one I would highlight is that they have different networks than men. And it depends on how much of their career they spent really working in an office or an at-home environment, or how much they actually worked. I think you start a business very often based on trying to solve a problem that you have seen or experienced. Yeah. So this is what you come back to, and I wanted to mention this point when we move on to talk about college students too. But if women are not exposed to the larger picture or a certain kind of content or experiences, then it's harder for them to identify problems and start addressing them. So again, what we see in terms of what kind of businesses women start may be different too than from what kind of businesses men start.
Yeah, and we'll talk about college and social in a second, but I think one of the things that when you talk about entrepreneurship, and we'll talk about that as we get into the conversation, entrepreneurship doesn't always have to be starting your own business. You can be entrepreneurial in the organization. You can be entrepreneurial in a variety of settings, and I think that's a misconception that I'd like to address, because again, especially around here, between the coasts, I get what Silicon Valley is, and I get what New York and Boston are. But there's a lot more in between those, and that's not necessarily the same type of opportunity set. Not better or worse, just different. And the need to be entrepreneurial within your own organization is just as big as any other need. So let's talk about maybe college students. And as you're talking about it, if you can elaborate a little bit about what an accelerator is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thanks for pointing that out. With the Female Accelerator, our goal was to have those women start a business. So in addition to education, we also offered funding to them, and that's typical for an accelerator. Mm-hmm. An accelerator is usually some sort of structured program where you go through the program as part of a cohort during a set time frame, and you have access to content, usually mentoring, and some sort of funding. That's how we describe an accelerator. Mm-hmm. And it usually does help the participants kind of validate their idea and grow their networks.
Excellent. Thank you. So tell me a bit about, and I know that's where your passion lies and certainly overlaps with mine. Tell me about college, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, programs, students, and the interaction.
Absolutely. I'm going to use EEC, the Entrepreneurship Education Consortium, as an example. John Carroll is an early and very active member of this network. EEC is a network of higher education institutions, colleges, and universities, right now all located here in Northeast Ohio. And what it does, it really pools resources and shares information. At the end of the day, you want to know, am I doing it right? Is this something where I could do better? How does it happen in other parts of the region? How can we work together and collaborate to give college student entrepreneurship maybe a bigger presence in the region? Or how can we pool our resources to bring more to our students on campuses? So really that's what EEC is about, in addition to kind of, we talked about data before, mm-hmm. collecting maybe more, in a more coordinated effort, data that we can share with the larger community. So right now EEC is running a long-standing program called Idea Labs, which is a pitch competition that John Carroll hosted several times. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for it. But it's really about helping students identify a problem, formulate a solution around it, and be able to pitch, tell that story. How would I solve this differently? Idea Labs is a pitch competition. That's what a pitch is. And we do have cash prizes for the students. The way it works is that up to two businesses from each member school campuses can kind of move on and roll up to a regional level competition, thanks to EEC. A lot of our other programs are, to be honest, right now tech-focused or tech-related, because let's face it, a lot of entrepreneurs rely on technology, and they could do things better and faster and cheaper if they would utilize, or if they are utilizing technology. So we do have a program called Tech Side Hustle, which encourages college students who are interested in starting a technology-based side hustle, and they want to found their own business. Again, it's an accelerator, mm-hmm. just like I mentioned. It has mentoring, content, funding attached to it, and we are excited to pull from the entire region, all EEC member schools. So I think that's a fun one that we want to continue in the next 2 years. We also have a tech internship. Yeah, that's something that I think you and I both agree on, mm-hmm. that creating these connections for the students and kind of taking them out of their bubble and asking them to leave the campus is important. So we do have a tech internship going on where we place students at smaller or medium-sized tech businesses for a paid internship for a semester or two. And then third and last that I want to mention today is something called Tech Credentials. And that is really, again, helping the entrepreneurial students develop their own tech skills. And it's kind of like upskilling a little bit, and think very, very simple, like the Google or Amazon offered tech credentials, because those are skills that they can use themselves if they want to start their own business, or they can make themselves more marketable if they want to use their entrepreneurial skills as part of a larger company.
Yeah, that is incredibly impressive, and I knew about some of it, but I'm learning some of it for the first time. It aligns with so many things that we're trying to do at Boler College of Business at John Carroll University, and thank you for the recognition. As you know, you're always welcome on our campus.
Thank you.
And so some of the things that we focus on, obviously, are internships. That's critical. I think a school, a business school, but any school that doesn't mandate internship, at least one for its students, is doing them a disservice. Internships lead to jobs. We know that students, especially in a business school, certainly at the Boler College of Business, students come to graduate with a job. And so in addition to that, I think one of the things we're looking at is having what I call a degree plus. Mm-hmm. And the plus will be certifications, primarily in tech. And so you and I are thinking along the same lines. By the way, you don't have to be genius. I'm not saying you're not. I'm definitely not. But the idea is it's got to be tech. It's got to be tech. Everything is tech now. I walk around, talk around to anyone who would listen and say business is tech and tech is business. There is no separation. There is no technology business. Every business is a technology business. And so because of that, as a business school dean, my responsibility is to make sure that my students, by the time they graduate, are technologically proficient. They don't have to necessarily be computer engineers and software programs, but they need to understand what software programming is, what AI is, what blockchain is, how are these applied, what can they do with it, can they talk with coders and tell them what they want to do, even though AI now makes that unnecessary. You can literally code whatever you want just by telling the computer to do it. And so, but the point is, you need to be proficient in technology, and that's something that we're focusing very heavily on.
You mentioned this approach, and I was so amazed by it when we talked at Futureland.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, it's Dr. Martin was talking about what business schools are the root of all evil. Not really. Maybe where he was, I have no idea. But what we're doing, and I think more schools will be doing that, is providing students with internships, with technological knowledge, internationalizing the curriculum, which I think is critical. You and I take that for granted, right? We've been all over the world. We know what it's like to be foreigners. Most of our students don't. Right? They need to know that we're working in a global economy, in a flat world. Any cliche you want to talk about is true, and so they need to understand that and not just read about it or watch YouTube videos about that. And so they need to be doing all that and have impact on their ecosystem, and that's something that we believe in and really push that as one of the foundations of what we call the Boler effect. So talking about ecosystem impact, tell me a little bit about social entrepreneurship.
Thank you. That is actually one of my other passion projects, working with social entrepreneurs. And they can be students or adults. In fact, we do see a lot of college students who express interest in starting a business that has a dual goal. And that's really what a social enterprise is. That's how at least we define it at Sea Change.
What is it? Okay.
What is it?
Yes.
I know there are so many definitions floating around, but the way we define social enterprise at Sea Change is that it's a business, and it can be incorporated as a for-profit or non-profit or a benefit corporation. But what it makes a social enterprise, that it has two goals. One is that, yes, it has to do well. Yes, it's a business. It has to survive. It can't go bankrupt after a year or two, hopefully. But it also has an other goal, and it's equally important, that it wants to have a measurable positive impact on society. Yeah, so it's not, what I like about it is that it's not limited to a certain industry. You can decide where you want to make an impact, whether it's, positively impacting the environment or education or housing, you name it. But the fact is that your business has those two goals, and they are equal. You want to do well and do good.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. Well, first of all, yeah, if you don't do well, you can't do good. And it's weird to me that sometimes when I say that, it comes across as controversial. So I want to say this and make it very clear. And if you disagree, which I'll be shocked, I want to hear why. An enterprise needs to be profitable. I cannot believe I have to say it, but I do. Every class I teach, every group I talk to, I ask, what is the number one, in fact, the only goal of an enterprise? And it takes a while until people get to the right answer. So if any of my future students are watching this now, they can cheat. Because the right answer is be profitable. Be profitable now, be even more profitable in the future. That's it. Everything else is a derivative of that particular goal. And so you cannot do good. You cannot save the earth, save the whales, save the name your save issue without having the funds to do it. And one other critical mistake that folks sometimes make, even if they don't notice that they're making it, is assuming that a nonprofit doesn't have to be in the black, right? And so I always say, not. By the way, it's an unfortunate term. It needs to. Somebody needs to come up with a better term because it's not about losing money. Okay, and so when you realize that, and thank you for solidifying that, then you can go and carry out your purpose. There's a difference between a goal and a purpose. The goal is to be profitable. The purpose is whatever you want it to be. And God bless you for doing amazing things, and great. And so, I'm especially interested in social entrepreneurship because, in all honesty, it's not something I've done. So most of my career has been in venture capital technology investing. And I could probably make a claim that any successful enterprise helps society. I don't know how TikTok does, but in general, I would say that most advancements help society. But I think you're making it much sharper. I think from what you're explaining is, and I want to ask you about is, how do you measure impact on society? What are the metrics that some social entrepreneurs would use or aspire to?
It's a very good question, and it's a very tough question. I think if you are a social entrepreneur, it is something that you have to be very clear about. Otherwise, you don't know if you are making progress, if you are successful or not. So what we like to encourage our Sea Change participant, again, it's an accelerator program, so I can talk about our participants. So what we encourage our participants to do is really to identify how they will make money. What are those revenue streams first, and have that really kind of traditional business view of how will I make sure that my organization is going to be around and survive. In addition, how do I define my social impact, and what are my units? Just like if you are selling shoes, and I'm using Tom's shoes as an example because a lot of people are familiar with them, especially with their buy one, give one model. Yeah, so you know that, okay, if I buy a pair of Tom's shoes, then they will donate one. It's very clear and very simple to understand for the consumer, but there was a lot of work that Tom Shoes had to do to figure it out. Okay, what does it cost for us to be able to do that? So that's the extra step I think that social entrepreneurs have to go through, that in addition to their business model, they really have to have a model for their social impact. And that includes identifying their unit of impact. In the case of Tom Shoes, it's one pair donated.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Again, the overlap between strictly for-profit capitalistic enterprises and social entrepreneurs is almost complete. It really is about what you're aspiring to do that sets the differences. Being profitable, having a business plan, and I think one of the most critical overlooked elements of running an enterprise is knowing what to measure. Now, by the way, I always say if it can't be measured, throw it out. We don't care. There's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't make any sense. You have to know what to measure. And I think I plug every once in a while the OKR methodology of objectives and known results. Objectives, what are we trying to do? Known results, how are we going to measure it? Wonderful. What a simple way to look at things. And yet, like most simple things, incredibly effective. So tell me a little bit about I should take a step back. We have an entrepreneurship program at Boler College of Business, nationally renowned, phenomenal entrepreneurship students and program. And so we just launched a master's program in innovation and entrepreneurship. And I love teaching students. And so I've always taught MBA classes. I insisted on teaching in this new program, and I'll be teaching the social entrepreneurship class. And so, I'm asking you these questions not just for the benefit of all our three viewers, but maybe four by now, but also for myself, trying to understand, and you're putting me at ease because everything I know and everything I teach about business applies. It really is the where do you take it part that makes a difference. And my observation has been that more and more businesses are transitioning towards having a societal impact. It goes back to even us as a business school. We're saying we have an ecosystem impact. By the way, that's very deliberate. I think there's a difference between a societal impact or social impact and ecosystem impact. As a institution of higher education, we impact the ecosystem, which includes social and societal. But I think it's beyond that. We have, especially as a business school, we have a responsibility for the ecosystem. We are a fundamental player in it. So are nonprofits, and so are government agencies and for-profits, obviously. But that is really what makes a successful ecosystem, something that we're trying to do here in Northeast Ohio. Your thoughts about that?
Absolutely, and I commend you on that effort because, as I mentioned, I see a lot of college students who are interested in that dual purpose, doing well and doing good. So I'm so glad to hear you are teaching that class. I know they will learn a lot from you. And I wanted to again commend you on looking at it from several angles, because it is one thing to do to have a positive impact on society, but just like you pointed out, the ecosystem is equally important, and the community. I know that John Carroll works a lot with the surrounding communities.
Sure.
And so again, there are a lot of angles and a lot of ways to look at it. I did want to mention a few local examples.
Please.
Yeah, we talked about Tom's Shoes, but again, that's larger scale. Here in Northeast Ohio, we do have a lot of social enterprises. I want to mention Upcycle Part Shop or Rust Belt Riders. Again, they want to kind of keep waste out of landfills. Yeah, they want to give a second life to things. Or Harness Cycle. They just went through something called B Lab certification. So now they are certified B Corp, which means that they actually went through the process of really reevaluating everything they do, both with their employees and how their business impacts the environment and whatnot. So it's a very prestigious certification that if you are really committed to, you can get. But just like you mentioned, large corporations have that desire now, and it's kind of hard, I think, to change the culture, because that's what it is. If you belong to the conscious capitalism movement, which is another term, but it is something that I think large corporations can adopt. It's kind of a lens or a culture that they want to introduce at the business, is that, okay, we need to really think about our stakeholders, all of them, and how what we do impacts them. So conscious capitalism is part of this larger movement of just like you mentioned, the business's desire to do good as well.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm getting the wrap up sign. So there's a question that I always have at the end of this that's directed at me, but I also want to direct it at you, and then I'll follow up. If you could leave our audience with one thought, a call to action, what would that be?
Absolutely. I would say that we should help students, we have been talking about college students, to see the possibilities and see themselves as entrepreneur and entrepreneurial within a larger organization. And how can you do that? You should, we talked about internship, really make an effort to make internship part of their experience. You should make connections for them in the community, and you should really make sure they are aware of the resources we have here in Northeast Ohio. Because if they don't do those things, then it would be really hard for them to imagine themselves after they graduate and how they could stay and work in our region.
Thank you. My final thought for the day is about entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship as a state of mind, as a mindset, as an approach to life, not just school. And so what I'll say is this. I try to being an entrepreneur and working with entrepreneurs my entire career, I try to stay that way. And what that means is it really is different than what Dr. Martin was saying about, business schools are the root of all evil. And the reason is entrepreneurial thinking allows you to disregard frameworks. In fact, the whole idea of frameworks is sort of counter to entrepreneurship. And so looking at gaps, understanding how things should be in the future, not based on past trends, but what you think they should. And so how do you jump towards the future and then reverse engineer to what you need to do rather than build on whatever happened till now and let's see where it takes us. That's one. Two, and I've mentioned this before, is embracing failure as a learning experience and a positive move forward. I think there's still in our culture a severe fear of failure, an embarrassment related to that, and I think it stops us from trying things. And so we talked about that in the beginning. And so embrace failure. Failure it means you tried. As an investor, when we're pitched by founders that are serial entrepreneurs and in fact enjoy talking about their previous failures, those are the ones that we're interested in, because we care less about the failure and care more about the persistence, care more about the passion, care more about the energy that goes into finding success, rather than this fear, this paralyzing fear of failure that I think is endemic to some business schools. So if I could leave our listeners and viewers with a thought for today is embrace entrepreneurship, understand its potential, and drop frameworks. Frameworks are by their very nature restricting. And that would be it for my thought for today. So that's it for today. I want to thank my special guest, Reka Barabas, for joining me for a conversation today on the bottom line with the Business Dean. That's it for today. Thanks again. Hey, so thanks for joining us for the bottom line with the Business Dean. If you liked what you saw and you liked what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review. And be sure to check out the Boler College of Business on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for more of what's happening with the Business Dean. That's me. And we'll see you next time.